Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 421, and today's date is July 21st, 2014, and the title of this episode is All These False Flag Events Will Eventually Lead to World War III. Because what are we seeing around the world right now? Everything is in chaos. We're looking at Israel and Gaza. Israel is just bombarding Gaza non-stop, killing as many people as possible. And all of this is going on, and no one is really saying anything. We look at the Middle East. We see the Islamic State maneuvering and moving further into Syria. They're pretty much taking over Iraq right now. And of course, the U.S. is just standing by because their plan is to completely invade this area. So they're just waiting for the right moment there. We also see what's happening in Ukraine with the Malaysian airliner that was downed. A lot of propaganda coming out from the United States government and the central bankers, and they're continually just pushing the notion that Russia was behind it, Putin was behind it, the pro-Russian people were behind it. They don't want to talk about any type of proof. They don't want to listen to any type of proof. They just want to keep the rhetoric up and continually nonstop, continually say this to convince everyone, and as you keep repeating something over and over, people start to believe it. But we have to look at facts, and right now the United States government, central bankers, they have no facts. They haven't produced anything. Go back to August of 2013 when Assad used chemical weapons on his own people. They had no proof. They just kept showing the same picture over and over. Look at the dead people. They were gassed. He did it. Look at the dead people. He was gassed. He did it, but they had no proof, and this is why it really fell apart, because the people in England said, listen, there's no proof. We're not going to war for this. We don't want to enter Syria. There's really no proof, and every time people asked for proof, they couldn't produce it. They just kept on repeating the same exact thing. The same thing is happening right now. They're out there continually saying, yes, they did it, yes, they did it, Russia, Putin, because they need to have a new poster person of the enemy that will be fighting in war. And you have to remember, the players are always the same. It's China, it's Russia, it's North Korea, Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela. They are on one side here. So you can see right now, Russia, Putin is backing Assad, backing Maliki, backing the pro-Russian people who are fighting the puppet government in Ukraine. China is behind everything that's going on in pretty much Central Africa and is behind the people in Afghanistan, helping them build their infrastructure, pumping in billions of dollars. And we can see right now that all of this is starting to really escalate right now. And what is the reason for this is because the whole entire fiat dollar system is completely imploding on itself, and we can see countries now maneuvering to separate themselves from it. We see the BRIC nations sign the agreement that created that the new BRICS bank. We see other countries saying, you know what, it's time to remove some of the dollar reserves, go into other type of currencies, get our gold back, purchase more gold, and they're doing this on purpose. It is a specific reason why they're doing this, because they realize war is coming. And as we see more and more of these events occur, it's going to bring us closer and closer to war. They're trying to kick something off, and they will not stop. We've already seen the pivot to Asia. China is surrounded. We see now in Russia more countries in that region, even though they're not part of NATO, the U.S., NATO are bringing in military assets to these countries. They are preparing. They've set up the missile shield with more advanced weapons. More military assets are coming into this area. So we have Eastern Europe all ready for Russia. We have the Pacific all ready for China, and they're continually pushing this agenda. They will not stop until they get this war started, because we can see right now that the dollar is finished. It cannot go anywhere, and this is why the bankers are out there, the Fed's out there, the U.S. government's out there, all defending the dollar at this point, all making these ridiculous reasons of why the dollar is strong, because people have strong faith in it, because the dollar is backed up by the Fed and backed up by the Fed and the U.S. government. But really, the U.S. dollar is backed up by war. it's backed up by force. It's backed up by nothing. And as soon as that force dwindles away, people would just get rid of it right now. If the United States didn't have the armed forces that it has and the ability to scare most of the countries, guess what? Most of these countries would say, you know what? We don't need this dollar. Let's just get rid of it. And we would see this happen quite quickly. Now, since the United States has a huge armed forces, countries are, weighing, they're saying, oh, I don't want to get rid of it right now. I don't want sanctions. I don't want this. And they're very, very nervous. And this is why it's taking some time here. But countries now are moving away. Let's get into the economic collapse news. And what are we seeing here? Well, we are seeing more and more layoffs, more store closings. We're seeing Microsoft, of course, just laid off 18,000 people. We're seeing Coach now laying off another 150. We see Walgreens closing their Flagstaff distribution center, 345 jobs being laid off. And as we go further into this season, we're going to see more layoffs occurring in this fall, because this is a huge time when companies start to lay off people. Now, Allergen is going to cut 1,500 employees in restructuring. And of course, this is what all these companies say. They're reorganizing, the restructuring. They have to cut jobs to increase profits, and they always use this excuse, and these are the terms they use. But what they're really doing is their profits aren't there. They need to cut the expenses, and as more and more as the profits fall, they cut more and more people, and this is exactly what we're seeing right now. Now, in my other reports, we talked about how the automobile industry is pushing loans to subprime people. Well, it seems like it's taking its toll right now. Auto loans have surged to record highs, and most concerning, recently we have seen delinquencies and late payments spike. As one car owner explained, that he bought a car, he should have never purchased the car. He bought it, he had really bad credit, he had real no money, but the deal was so great, he said that was the worst decision he's ever made. And now he's stuck with this car. And the New York Times are reporting that auto loans to people with tarnished credit have risen more than 130%, because in the end game right here, what do? They give out loans to anyone that's breathing because they need to pump the system up. And this is what we saw in the auto industry. They were channel stuffing throughout the year. They were giving loans to subprime people, and they're continually doing this. Loans were typically at twice the size of the value of the used cars purchased. Dozens of loans that included incorrect information about borrowers' income and employment, leading people who had lost their jobs, were in bankruptcy, or were living on Social Security to qualify for loans that they could never afford. And we saw this back prior to 2008 when they were giving loans out to pretty much anyone that really couldn't afford anything. The same thing is happening right now. They don't care. You have a heartbeat? We'll give you a loan. And this is why all the information is messed up. Borrowers who are more than 60 days late on their car payments also jumped in 22 states. So we are seeing a lot more late payments, a lot more people delinquent, and it's spreading across the country. And soon this will then spread to real estate, and on and on and on. We'll see. Of course, we know that student loans having a major problems, because the college kids that are coming out of college, 80% of them cannot find jobs. They are delinquent. They're defaulting on their loans, and this is why the U.S. government is trying to help them out to cover this up a little bit longer by deferring their payments, for making their payments a little bit lower, because they realize there are no jobs out there, and this is why they have to do it. If there were plenty of jobs out there, there'd be no reason for this. They'd go get their job, they'd have enough money to pay for these loans, and everything would be fine. But what we're seeing right now is a complete collapse of the entire system. It's already starting, and like I said before, the illusionary numbers, GDP, inflation, unemployment, are starting to separate themselves from what's happening in the real economy. Now, we understand that the United States placed more sanctions on Russia, and ever since this Malaysian incident occurred, the United States is using this as a springboard to get other countries on board, saying, see, we told you it was Russia. Now we have to place more sanctions. And in Canada, stepped up to the plate and said, well, we're going to expedite these new sanctions against Russia because what happened with the Malaysian airline, we do believe it was them, and now we have to place more sanctions on them. Of course, they have no proof. There is no proof. It's just hearsay, and it's propaganda repeating itself over and over and over. And if you look on the corporate media, all they're doing is continually playing the same thing over and over and over. Right now, Putin is saying, you know what? Russia is done with IBM. It's done with Microsoft. It looks like they're heading down the same path as China, getting rid of American companies. And we can see Russia's pushing this very, very hard. Now, U.S. is out there saying that, oh yeah, these sanctions are really hurting the Russian businesses, and we can see their effects, but actually, it's not really doing anything. Right now, Russia's biggest natural gas producer and exporter, Gazprom, continues to pay its bills via Gazprom Bank, the Russian-based bank, which has recently been targeted by new U.S. sanctions. Now, the Gazprom Group, including Gazprom Export LLC, has been carrying out all ruble and foreign payments on the bills of Gazprom. Remember, they started to step back and move away from the dollar. So guess what? Sanctions don't affect them. So it really doesn't matter. And all the countries they're doing business with, if they're dealing in rubles or yuan or other currencies, guess what? It's a direct trade. Dollar's not involved. Sanctions don't hurt them. And what's very interesting about all these sanctions that's coming out now is that Germany's economy is starting to stagnate in the second quarter. Now, of course, they're coming out and they're using the excuse that, oh yes, this is starting to stagnate a little bit, but we see great improvements for the rest of the year. And the real reason for all of this, it's looking like the sanctions are really starting to take effect on Germany. And this is why Germany's kind of pivoting now towards Russia and moving away from the U.S. because they're realizing, we have a lot of business in Russia, and if we continue down this path, we're going to destroy our economy. And what's happening right now, almost a quarter of German export companies is affected by sanctions imposed by the United States and the European Union on Russia. So we can see right now that sanctions against Russia affected every fourth German exporter. So it's really taking its toll on Germany right now. Now, China is out there while the United States central bankers are making war in every part of the world, using their force, using false flags. It seems like China now is around the world making more and more deals. And we can see right now Argentina signed deals on Friday to borrow about $7.5 billion from China at a time when the Latin American country cannot tap global capital markets. They're helping Argentina out. The Chinese bank also granted $2.1 billion loan to help finance a long-delayed railway project that would make it more efficient to transport grains from Argentina's agricultural plains to its ports. China is Argentina's second largest trading partner after neighbor Brazil. In 2013, Argentina's trade deficit with Asian country increased more than 20%. So we can see right now China is making deals, and they're not just making it in South America, they're also making it in Tanzania. Right now, China's Export-Import Bank has announced its support to the development of the $11 billion port in Tanzania. China has agreed to support the construction of road and rail networks to connect the rest of Tanzania to port area, and you can see they do this in many, many countries. They add the funds to include with schools, hospitals, infrastructure, ports, railroads, and they are pouring this money in, and they're using U.S. dollars. This is one way they can get rid of it and unload the dollar from their reserves. So we can see right now they are using this, getting rid of it, helping all these countries build their infrastructure. And again, at the same time, the U.S. is continually pushing war and forcing people to keep the dollar. Now we can see the border crisis is really getting out of hand. We can see I do have the map on the x22report.com. If you go to the top tab, it says resources, and then it says map of immigrants. It's a Google map, real time, showing you where all these kids are being dropped off, which places have failed, which are successes, which are proposed. And I'm keeping that map up there. But New York City right now, officials have formed a task force to help coordinate accommodations for these children. Actually, they're not even children, they're teenagers and even older. And looks like they're getting ready to set up different places in New York to accommodate these illegal aliens. Now, Governor Perry right now he's calling in the National Guard to help with the border crisis. And of course, the federal government saying that he's trying to militarize the border. This shouldn't be allowed. No, he's trying to protect the border because the federal government, who's supposed to be protecting our borders, is nowhere to be found. So each state has to say, you know what? We don't want these aliens coming in, so we need to close off the borders. And he's looking to have about 1,000 troops of the National Guard come in, and he says that the troops will arrive gradually over the next month, and will support troopers from the Texas Department of Public Safety. And we can see right now the federal government doesn't want this, of course. They want the illegals to come right over and be protected by the law where they have to see an immigration judge, and they want this to continue. We know the Beast Train, which is a Kansas City corporation, is bringing them up, and someone is paying the criminals to let them come through. And of course, not just the teenagers are coming through, but drug cartels coming through. Supposedly terrorists are coming through, and everyone else is coming through at this time because the border agents are very busy doing the paperwork and trying to keep up with all these illegals coming in. Now, it looks like the White House quietly exempted about 4.5 million people in 5 territories from Obamacare. Now, how can they just do this? They need the Congress to approve this, but you know what? The White House said, no, we can make our own laws. We don't need approval from a Congress. We don't need any votes. On no legal basis, all 4.5 million residents of the 5 U.S. territories were quietly released from Obamacare. It seems the costs of health care soared in these 5 territories due to uneconomic mandates. All of a sudden last week, HHS discovered new powers after a careful review of the situation and the relevant statutory language that enabled them to selectively exempt America, Samoa, Guam, Puerto Rico, Northern Mariana Islands, and Virgin Islands from Obamacare. Again, HHS has no legal authority to exclude these territories whatsoever, but they did it anyhow. And of course, the Affordable Care Act is really becoming the expensive Care Act, and we're seeing premiums skyrocket for many, many people, and they are complaining and they're saying they can't afford this. But you have to remember, this was not created to help everyday people with health insurance. This was created to bring in revenue to the insurance companies, to bring in revenue to the federal government, because there's taxes intertwined, there's penalties on there, and I've said this many times. If the federal government is really going to do something for the people, they would make it for the people. And how would you do this? You would make it truly affordable. There'd be no penalties on there. You wouldn't have these deductibles. You would make a plan that truly benefits the people. And the second thing is, you wouldn't have to exempt the government from this health insurance. You would say, listen, we are your leaders. We will sign up for it first because we believe in it so much. This did not happen with Obamacare. Most of the people were exempted, so you can tell right there it's not good for the government people, but it's good for you serfs, so you better take it. You can just see how this has been played out, and you know this is not for the people whatsoever. Now, Turkey is out there, and it's proposing to switch to national currency payments in trade with Russia. Turkey suggested using national currencies in trade with Russia. Russian authorities consider renewing the talks on switching to a national currency in order to decrease the dependency of the U.S. dollar amid tense relations with the West due to, of course, Ukraine. So we can see more and more countries are saying, you know what, we need to step away from the dollar. We don't want to be sanctioned. We don't want to be forced. We don't want to be pushed. And more countries are starting to do this. Now, we understand that Israel right now is bombarding Gaza right now, killing many, many people. A lot of them are children. And again, this is all for 2 reasons that I'm looking at right now. One is the 122 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 1.6 billion barrels of oil off the coast that Israel wants to get their hands on, but Gaza is sitting in the way. I also listened to other things about how Israel is trying to remove the Palestinians completely from the land of Israel. And we see these two things maneuvering and pushing and going on. And this is why they're trying to destroy all the structures, hitting the hospitals. And of course, they're using the theme that, yes, there's missiles. It's the same thing that the United States central bankers use. Yes, we had to go in there because we believe there's terrorists, so we used drones and we obliterated the apartment building. It's the same thing that they use. Yes, we think something's there. We really don't have definite proof, but we're just going to bomb it. So they've been hitting all civilian locations and damaging the infrastructure, killing many, many people. And we have to remember, and we have to go back in time. Back in January, what we've seen is that Russia and the Palestinians in Gaza made a deal, and Russia was going to pump in billions of dollars into this area to help extract the natural gas and the billions of barrels of oil. So already we had the government of Gaza, which is Hamas, making deals with Russia. Netanyahu taking a look at this, of course, as lip service goes, saying, hey, whoa, 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 you got gas over there? You're making deals with them? And all of a sudden, how many months later? 6 months later, all of a sudden, there is an invasion inside of the country. Now, you have to remember, they're using the pretext that it was 3 teens that were killed. Of course, Hamas never took, they never said they did it. It was other groups that were saying we did it. They had no proof. But how these governments and bankers and these globalist elite do it is they don't use proof. They use propaganda to push their war agenda, and this is exactly what we're seeing. They're pushing the war agenda. You can see what they're doing, and it is horrific. Now, it looks like they did extend the time frame with the P5+1 deal. European Union has agreed to suspend until November 24th because they couldn't come to any type of an agreement. And like I said, these nuclear talks are a complete illusion. They're trying to get into the banking system. This is why they had the IMF come down, visit, taking a look at the banking system in Iran. They love to get the natural resources on the U.S. dollar because they've been trying to do this for many, many years. The same thing in Syria, and the goal has not changed. It is exactly the same. They are trying to push their agenda and get in there, and they won't stop. But the thing what's very interesting right now is since they extended the deadline, and of course the European nations really wanted to extend it because they wanted to talk this out, the United States was, I don't know if we should or shouldn't, and they had to go along with the rest. But what we're seeing right now is the United States is pushing the agenda that Russia may threaten the Iran negotiations. So you can see how this is starting to play out here. Russia may try to undermine the Iran nuclear talks. Senator Mark Kirk also suggested Moscow may use its role in the Iran discussions to retaliate against new U.S. punitive actions. So they are building up the case because they want all of this to come to light as time goes on, because they are pushing the agenda for war. Now they can say, oh, the Iran talks could not go forward because it was Russia's fault. Just like in Ukraine, they're still blaming the downed Malaysian flight on Russia. They're blaming the invasion of Crimea on Russia, and there was no invasion. They had a referendum. The referendum in the southeastern area of Ukraine was blamed on Russia. Everything is being blamed on Russia. And if you look back, when did this start? That's right. After Russia stepped in August of, it was September, October of 2013, after the United States central bankers couldn't get any traction out of the false flag chemical attack. Russia stepped in and said, listen, if Assad gets rid of his chemical weapons, will you be satisfied? Of course, the United States had to say yes at that point, and since that time, they've been trying to remove Assad with the Geneva II talks, with arming more and more of the rebels, creating the Islamic State. And ever since that point going forward, it was their job now to demonize Russia going forward, and this is exactly what they've been doing. And every time they do something, Russia, China, and other nations, like 105 BRIC nations now, are moving away from the dollar, and they're continually doing this. Now, Iraq is out there, and they're giving the U.S. an ultimatum. you come in here and help us out, or we're going to look for other help. And what he means by that, Maliki, is that they will turn to Russia. Now, is this exactly what the United States central bankers want? It's starting to look like that. They want Russia to go into here because now they can make the propaganda case that Russia now is invading Iraq. Russia now is moving into different areas, and you can see they're really going to try to push this agenda. Okay, now, since the downing of the Malaysian flight, Ukraine has come out and said the authorities there are preparing international legal claims, and they're going to call the Donetsk and Lugansk area, those People's Republic, a terrorist organization. Now, they're not terrorists. They are people who had a peaceful vote to not be part of the puppet regime. But of course, Ukraine didn't want this, and they started with their anti-terrorism forces. So they're the ones who gave the names to these people. They're the ones who are continually calling them terrorists, but they are not terrorists. They are just the people of the country saying, we don't want to be a part of it. I guess it's really almost the same like in the Revolution time, where the British called the people in the America at that time terrorists because they didn't want to be a part of the British government. So the same thing's happening right now. They're looking to have their freedom, and they're trying to push their agenda to be free, and this is why they're fighting. They're fighting to be free of this puppet regime, which was really not elected by the people. It was elected by a small group inside Ukraine. Now, Russia is calling for an investigation of the foreign mercenaries inside Ukraine, and we know for a fact there are foreign mercenaries in there. They want Sweden, Finland, the Baltic states, France to conduct a thorough investigation into the alleged involvement of mercenaries inside of Ukraine, pushing the agenda. And again, Russia knows there are mercenaries in there. They know it's not the full Ukraine army. They know that most of them had been changing sides, and they know that these are the paid mercenaries that are inside the country, and this is why Ukraine had to go to the draft to find people to fight, and the families are saying, no, we don't want our children to fight in this, and they're having problems finding people to join the armed forces. Okay, now the UK is out there, and they're out there saying, we're going to freeze Russian billions. Cameron's out there warning Putin over the jet downage, and he's saying, listen, we know it was you, and if you don't come and admit that it was you, we're going to start really putting heavy sanctions against you. And you can see all across the world, they're using this same propaganda over and over and over. Now, China came out, and they said, well, the West has successfully put itself in a position to dictate political correctness in international discourse. The Western rush to judge Russia is not based on evidence or logic. It is yet another example of the power of Western opinion as a political tool. The one-sided accusation is not surprising in light of their long-time stance on the crisis in eastern Ukraine and their attitude towards Russia's absorption of Crimea in March. But without convincing evidence, jumping to a conclusion will only heighten regional tension and is not conducive to finding out the truth. Well, they don't want to find out the truth because they know what the truth is. They know they created and handled this false flag event. So why would they want to find out what is really going on here? Now, there was a video, and it was playing on the corporate media, showing that the Buk missile launcher was heading back to Russia, and I think it was on MSN, CNBC, and many other corporate news stations. But what's interesting out of Misha's blog here, what we're seeing is that the Buk system that they're showing in this video is that this area is not in the pro-Russian area. It's actually in the Ukrainian area. And the tabloids carried the photos and video of what was alleged to be a rebel Buk launch heading back to Russia. The article carried a claim from some Ukrainian source that the launcher was missing several missiles after having shot them at the Malaysian 777. On the CBS program Face the Nation, Mr. Kerry referred to a video that the Ukrainians have made public showing an SA-11 unit heading back to Russia. However, going by the billboard and other features of the scenery, Russian bloggers and news sources claim to have identified the road in the video as having been taken in or near the town of, I'm going to try to pronounce this name, Krasnomersk. in Ukraine, and it's under Kiev's control since May. And this town is about 120 kilometers from the Russian border and 80 kilometers from where the Malaysian 777 went down. So we can see right now they just were found out again. There was a billboard, and it was a car dealership billboard, and it is in the controlled section of Ukraine. So, yeah, there were missiles missing because guess what? The Kiev puppet regime used it to shoot down the plane. Now, we know they cordoned off the entire Donetsk area around the crash, but what's very interesting is that Ukraine is continually bombarding the Donetsk area. Warplanes delivered an airstrike by unguided rocket projectiles, and they were firing at the railway station in the city of Donetsk. Now, we know the bodies are being put onto the train. Why would they be targeting a railway station in Donetsk? Why are they even bombing in Donetsk at this point? You would think they want to stop doing this, but we know why they are, because they are guilty and they know it. And we're seeing right now that the evidence that is being presented is starting to break down, and we're starting to see that it has been forged and faked. A group of experts studied the tapes that came out the other day where they're saying they had conversations between the pro-Russian people about bringing down a plane. Well, it looks like these tapes are segmented into different sections, and this audio recording is not an integral file and is made up of several fragments. A spectral and time analysis has showed that the dialogue was cut into pieces and then reassembled. Short pauses in the tape are very indicative. The audio file has preserved time marks, which show that the dialogue was assembled from various episodes. The tape's linguistic analysis also shows that those who made the fake tape clearly didn't have enough material and time. And we also know that the timestamp on these tapes, on the video, was made a day prior. So we can see right now this evidence that they keep producing is really starting to fall apart. Now, Russia came out today with their evidence saying that a Su-25 fighter jet was gaining height towards the MH-17 Boeing on the day of the catastrophe. This is also confirmed by that Spanish air traffic controller, where he said, yes, there are two planes flanking the Boeing jet, and they are next to it. So this is really confirming it, and of course the U.S. is saying, we don't know what you're talking about. Ukraine is saying, we don't know what you're talking about. And they just keep going on with the propaganda. Yes, it was Russia. Yes, it was Russia, but we have no proof. Now, we also see that Ukraine positioned their Buk missile system around Donetsk. It was right outside of it. And Russian monitoring systems detected up to 4 Ukrainian Buk M1 air defense systems in the crash area on the day of the accident. Why would the Ukrainian military deploy this weaponry? Think about this for a second. Why do they even have it in this area? It makes no sense. The pro-Russian people, they don't fly planes. So why would it be there? It makes no sense. And the only reason they would bring this in is if they had a special mission for it. And right now, the Russians have said that the intensity of Ukrainian air defense system radar stations increased dramatically on the day of the crash. They're also saying that the U.S. had their satellites positioned right over what was happening, and they want the U.S. to publish the photos that they've captured. Now, why? Think about this. If the United States central bankers had the satellite imagery, wouldn't they come out with it right away to show everyone, yes, we have proof it was definitely Russia? Wouldn't that be the easiest thing, to bring that out? And Russia's calling them on it, saying, listen, we know your satellite was right above it. Where's the evidence? So far, they're not producing it. The question is, why? Now, we know now that the Malaysian Prime Minister and their group is inside of Ukraine, and Najib Razak says the Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 black boxes will be handed over to the Malaysians from Donetsk, and they're going to give them to them, and they want them to have it. That's why they were keeping it. They didn't want it to fall into Ukrainian government's hand, and they're handing this over. Now, what's very interesting right now is that the Malaysian Airlines, they are confirming that it was instructed to fly the MH17 at lower altitude over East Ukraine. And what they're saying is that on the matter of the flight path, they're saying that the pilot was instructed to fly in this path. Now the question is, who gives these instructions? That's right, the Ukrainian air traffic controller. Not the pro-Russian, not Russia. They were inside Ukraine, and they were the ones who gave the instructions to do this. Now, the questions we all have is, why isn't the United States government, central bankers, or the Kiev government providing real proof? They have provided absolutely nothing. Everything they produced right now has been falsified. And this goes back to what happened in Syria. There was no proof. The same thing is happening now. They have no proof. Now think about this. We've seen pictures of all the passports, perfect condition. We've seen the reports of the belongings to the people. Again, no dirt, no burn marks, no smoke marks. A perfect white shirt is completely white. Nothing. There's nothing on it. Something is terribly wrong here, and we know what it is. It has been a false flag event from the beginning. This was to start the story of demonizing Russia, and we can see they are not letting up with this whatsoever. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.